After 20 years of leading NACS, Henry Armour is stepping down as president and CEO at the end of 2025, but he will continue to lead NACS's international activities. We have a two-part podcast. In last week, in part one, we talked about 5 of the most important focal areas of NACS over the last 20 years. This week, in part 2, I'm talking to Henry about an insider's view about what took place over the last 20 years and how the industry had some of these triumphs, whether it was debit card swipe fee reform or enhancing our industry's image. Let's take a listen. We talked about the 5 areas that you've really focused on over the last 20 years, NACS has focused on. I want to dive in a little bit to a couple of them. Let's start with research. Now, research started at NACS as a one-page document more than 50 years ago. Now it is, I don't even want to say it's hundreds of pages because it's not hundreds of pages. It's the insights and it's acquiring assets that allow us for those to create those insights. So can you talk a little about both acquiring assets and having partnerships to make us smarter so our industry is smarter?
Sure. So on the knowledge front, you reference, I think, our first State of the Industry report, probably wasn't even called that. It was more than 40 years ago, and it was basically one page of here's what industry sales and so forth were in the industry. It's evolved into, 150, 175-page deep dive into, again, the needs of the industry, a very detailed, deep look at different areas of labor, of energy, of everything in our industry. Well, the world progresses, right? So we went from one page, I don't even know how they did that 40 years ago, but we're producing I would say the first generation, maybe second generation of SOI reports, and it was all like in Excel. Well, it wasn't even called Excel back then. What was it called? 1, 2, 3 or something, right? Spreadsheet stuff, manual entrance. People would mail or fax their information, corporate information, into NACS, and we would have people in our research department enter all of those into spreadsheets and merge them and all of that. Well, we started looking at this thing and we went, that's not very scalable doing it that way, right? And we saw an opportunity to acquire a company that had a more sophisticated way of integrating company data into a common database. It was called CSX. So as you go along, you have to improve your tools, right? And the learning there is obviously it was an imperative to move to a platform that was far more scalable, that we could import much more data into and therefore give better insights, deeper insights to our industry. But the other thing I learned on acquisitions is timing is a hugely important part of acquisitions. Is the acquiree ready to be acquired or not? Because CSX, the engine that we purchased, had been created by a few guys that were ready to retire, right? So the timing was right? We've tried some other acquisitions that we could never pull off because the timing wasn't right for the acquiree. So the learnings there is really, first of all, is this a major step up for you? Does this enhance your value? And second, is the timing right to make that acquisition? I would say another example of an acquisition, we we acquired Insight Research's European conference. It wasn't really a European conference. It was a UK-based conference that was always in London that really just attracted UK and Irish attendees. But in this journey that we've talked about a little bit earlier of growing our global presence, I had visited with a number of our European members on the continent, right? And doing due diligence before we made this acquisition was, do you need this? Is this an unmet need? Having a thought leadership conference in Europe and so forth. And they all were very positive about that. One of the things that I believe in, particularly when you're moving into a country or a region in the rest of the world for the first time, you're much better off acquiring a platform, even if it's not really the platform you want, but allows you to buy an existing platform and then pivot it, right? Rather than greenfield it, rather than build something from scratch. And that's what we did when we acquired the Insight Conference in the UK. We pivoted that to all of Europe. We left London as a permanent base, and we move it every year to another European city. This past year, we're in Copenhagen. Next year, we'll be in Warsaw. We've been in Paris. We've been in Barcelona. We've been in Oslo, to really show it is a European conference. So those are two acquisitions that NACS have made. We've also made some startup investments, really on behalf of the industry to enhance our knowledge base. It's usually a data flow issue. So we made an investment in a market basket analysis company that we got much deeper data on market basket analysis. And by the way, when the company was acquired, we maintained that access to data, and NACS benefited from a very good investment it had made. We continue to look at those things, but only when NACS can add strategic value.
So to a certain extent, it's a little similar to retailers looking to get into food service. And one way to do that is branded partnership before you go it alone. It's knowing you can create a competence and then expanding that competence.
Yeah, and another way to look at that is who do you have running it? So way back in Westar days, my company, we were doing food service, right? I thought we were doing it pretty well, but we were growing it, and I needed somebody to run the food service division of Westar. And I had historically been promoting store managers and regional managers in Westar to run not only C-store operations, but food service. And I decided food service is a big part of our business. Maybe I should go hire somebody whose core competency. So I hired a VP from Marriott food service division that was responsible for all of their catering in sports venues in the Western United States. And in 90 days, he closed 20% of our food service operations, and we made more money after that than before. So it's not just acquiring like a brand here or there or a platform over here. It's also acquiring the people with the expertise to know how to do it.
You talked a little bit about the Durbin Amendment. Just want to talk a little bit more about that. That happened, I believe, in 2010, and it led to $1 billion a year savings within our industry. But leading up to that, there was a lot of congressional testimony, these unique signature campaigns, getting millions of Americans to sign up and get the issue, not only sign up, but to get the issue and sign their names to it because they believed in it. There were pump topper programs where we had pump toppers.
Yep.
So take us through just kind of when you hear about all these dynamics, heard all these dynamics about how do we need to build out a campaign. Very unusual, but it worked. Were there any particular elements that you thought were particularly important in that process?
Well, let me first address how we even got a congressional focus on it. There was a huge debate after a hurricane in Congress about price gouging of gasoline in our industry, right? And I think our chairman at the time was Bill Douglas from Texas, and we asked Bill to testify in front of Congress on this price gouging situation. I'll come back to price gouging in a moment. But so Bill in his testimony, presented all the facts that showed there was no price gouging. And then he said, but if you want to investigate price gouging, you ought to look at credit card fees because those guys are the ones that are really gouging us and the American public. And it was that hearing that cracked open the door for us to launch First Debit, right? And we had to be very opportunistic because, listen, to go head on against the banks and credit card companies in Congress, rarely are you going to win that battle. Rarely are you going to win because they have so much money. They spend it so much on congressional campaigns and so forth. But we did a lot of due diligence. We learned from around the world how payments were being regulated and so forth. And then here comes Dodd-Frank, a big banking bill in the aftermath of the financial collapse in 2008, which was really caused by, as you'll recall, subprime mortgage offers that were collateralized and the bottom fell out and so forth. So Congress was putting together this massive regulatory bill to rein in the banks on lending. And we saw an opportunity to attach debit reform to that. And so we took the opportunity. We were well prepared. Kind of goes back to education, right? Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the skills that you can take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves? And we had an opportunity to attach that. Now, to get that done, as I said earlier, we're up against the wealthiest, best capitalized enemy in the world. What bullets did we have? And the bullets we had when we served half of America every day. We had a compelling story to say, hey, when you charge $10 on a credit card in our stores, we don't get $10, right? We get $9 in change, right? And our customers didn't understand that at first. What do you mean you don't get that? What? Well, they take the money. They don't charge you for the fee. They charge us for the fee. And from that, and that consumer research, we knew that most of our customers thought that was blatantly unfair. And again, we took advantage of the time because the financial collapse were caused by irresponsible bankers making loans. So the banks didn't have a great reputation in the country, and we exploited that. We ran in convenience stores around the country petitions to reform debit fees. We partnered with big companies, small companies. We had pump toppers that we could give to people. We had sign companies that donated those to support the industry. 7-Eleven ran through all of their franchisees big petition drive. Joe DePinto, the CEO of 7-Eleven, and I delivered, I think, 6 million of them on Capitol Hill. We gave big speeches in front of the Capitol and all of that. And so those were our bullets that we could fire. And it was harnessing the voice of our industry is what allowed us to do that, right? We'll never be able to do the same thing on credit. It's a different animal on credit, but we are pursuing a market-based Credit Card Competition Act that if we can get a vote, I think we win that. But again, we're up against the most well-capitalized enemy in the world.
You used the word trust earlier.
Yep.
And I think trust really applies here, because when we would advocate on this issue on Capitol Hill, they trusted that we are doing it for the right reasons. When we asked consumers to join us, they trusted us because our stores, our members, are trusted in their communities. So trust is a big part of how the Durbin Amendment happened.
Yeah, trust is super important externally, and it's super important internally. So trust is created externally if you're a fact-based organization. So let me go back to the whole debate on price gouging, right? NACS, you individually, we gathered the data showing that there was no price gouging and so forth. We gave presentations in Congress. You met with the national editors of every publication. We came out with a gas price survey every year to emphasize this. We did consumer research. How much does a retailer make on a gallon of gasoline? $1 when it was really 13 cents, right? So we brought facts to bear on that. It took a long time of pounding on that. I think 10 years later, if we did surveys and that issue had basically disappeared. As you've characterized it, it was a 10-year overnight success, right, on that. But to have external trust, you have to be trustworthy. You have to be acting based on facts, right, which is what NACS does. I referred earlier, we will not advocate for a public policy position that is bad public policy for the country. Now, in the aftermath of the financial collapse, was another, I won't even say opportunity. It was a situation that demanded trust. So that's in 2008. I had been CEO for, 3.5 years, something like that. And I'd made a lot of changes internally at NACS, right? Had worked hard to start us on a cultural transformation towards a more constructive culture, more constructive behaviors, to a certain extent, certainly more accountable, but also a flatter organization that respected different perspectives in order to make better decisions. And then here comes the financial collapse. It was a super trying time for the entire country. And I sat down with the staff leaders and I said, we're going to have to tighten our belts here to get through this. We're going to make a lot of cuts that we have to make. But one thing we are not going to do is we are not going to make cuts that impact our people. Because our people will get us through this. We will grow with our future, in the future with our people, and we are not going to endanger. We're not going to do anything that hurts our people. So during that time, we made a lot of cuts, but we kept giving raises, We kept giving bonuses. We didn't lay off anybody. We didn't have hiring freezes. We were the one organization in Washington, D.C. that stood out from all the rest. And that trust, I think, has allowed us to keep super talented people. It's allowed us to hire super talented people because that reputation permeates the city, right, going forward. And it allowed us in that establishing the trust in the organization, in the leadership of the organization, to weather some pretty trying times as we got to 2020. We have the social disruption around the George Floyd episode, racial disruption on that. We had the pandemic. We had vaccine mandates. We had all sorts of really trying, difficult waters to navigate. We navigated them well because of the trust that our staff had in us and the continual transparency of doing the right thing and thinking long term, of living with our values. Good people will have different perspectives. They'll have different ideas on how to address things, and you need to harvest all of those, not only within your organization, but you need to really reach out and explore what the rest of the world is doing in a situation, and then making sure that you're aligned with long-term social dynamics and expectations, which sometimes it's really difficult to resist easy short-term changes that are popular, but it's going to really cause you problems in the long term. So I think if in difficult times, if you're transparent, honest, listen, and then explain why you're making decisions you're making, not everybody is going to agree with them, right? Not everybody, because they don't see other facets of the diamond, but they'll appreciate the thoughtfulness behind what you've done.
So thinking through a couple of these cultural minefields, if you will,
Yep.
that you face. The first one was, you had alluded to, the hurricane, which wound up being an opportunity. Hurricane Katrina, an opportunity for advocacy, not that it was a good thing. But Hurricane Katrina happened about 6 weeks after you became president and CEO of NACS. Hurricane Katrina hit the site where we were supposed to have a NACS show 2 months later.
The NACS.
The NACS show. The greatest show on earth. And we were faced with figuring out what the next steps were at a time where communications was minimal in New Orleans. And we did something I'm not sure any association or organization has ever done before. We moved the show.
Well, yeah. So you might want to edit this out. My first reaction, I'm CEO for 6 weeks. The economic engine of NACS, the NACS show, is going to be in Louisiana, in New Orleans, 6 weeks after that, or 2 months after that, and Katrina wipes out the city. Oh, shit. What are we going to do here, right? And it reinforced for me, I think, beliefs I had always had in leadership, but it really reinforced them. So the first thing it reinforced was everybody that works for you knows how to do their job better than you did. And I'm CEO. I know a lot about convenience retailing. I know virtually zero about the nuts and bolts of trade shows, right? So it reinforced, hey, this is all about asking questions. It's also all about making sure your objective is right. And then the questions kind of validates what your objective is. But you gotta kind of validate what your objective is. So the first reaction, even internally here at NACS, was we have to cancel the show. And it's like, do we really? Well, yeah. New Orleans is wiped out. Can't have it. Well, can we have it any other place? And internally, people looked at me and said, are you crazy? It takes us like a year, because every single convention center is a different format, layout. It takes us a year to put this together. Are you nuts even asking that question? I'm asking the question, you know? And, you know, I think it was Bob Hughes here, maybe his predecessor, went, well, let me make some calls, right? And it just so happened that I think it was CES had canceled their show in Las Vegas. That was 6 weeks after our dates in New Orleans. But there was an open window there. It's like, well, you know, they're dates. So can we have the show there? It's like, oh, it takes us a year to put this together. We don't have the resources to do that. So then it became asking questions again. It's like, well, what's stopping us from doing that? What are the barriers from doing that? It's like, well, we do all these store tours. We don't have the resources to put that together. Fine, let's take that off the plate, right? Well, we do all these spouse events and all of that stuff, and that's a lot of work to put. Fine, let's take that off the plate. And a number of questions like that. And okay, so now you're saying maybe we can pull it off without doing this collection of things. And there were many more things than those too. Yeah. So can we pull it off when people walk in the door? It looks like the NACS show they expect every year. And that was both a question and a goal or a vision. And I think that inspired everybody to go, we can do that. And we're not going to make a half-assed NACS show. We're not going to make any excuses about why this isn't quite as good as it was last year. It's going to be every bit as good. And we pulled that off. So that was all about reinforcing really the role of a leader is to ask the right questions. Because everybody knows how to do their job. The better they know how to do their job, the less peripheral vision they have. They get expert bias. And the real role of a leader is to make sure they don't get hit by a bus coming sideways that they didn't see, or to open up their eyes to a peripheral path that they didn't see. This is not dictating the path, because they're no more than you do. They're smarter than you. It's just to make sure that they saw that, and then they'll know what to do. So that was, and you know, all of these, whether that's an episode, like last year in Tokyo at our Asian Summit, our Asian Industry Leader of the Year award went to Yu Meng Yu Ming Tang, who's the CEO of 7-Eleven Malaysia. His family owns that company. And I have the privilege every year when we have these industry leadership awards in Europe and in Asia to have a little interview on the stage, a little conversation about leadership with them. And when I was chatting on the stage with Yu Min, and I was asking about leadership, he brought up, and I agree with this, hey, listen, it's almost easier to live when you have to lead when you have a crisis than when the waters are calm. Because good teams will come together and they'll execute super well. When waters are calm, it's kind of same old type mentality. And so I think going back to the question of trust, and I think the whole question of how do you build enduring organizations, there are huge opportunities that come out of what you think are huge challenges, right? Katrina. I mean, we really changed the way we thought about the NACS show because of that. We were super proud of what we had accomplished, but we also realized that, hey, we shouldn't do things next year just because we did them last year, right? We learned that. We learned as we got into the hugely disruptive times of 2008 and then in 2020 that if we listen, if we're transparent, if we think things through, if we are guided by our core values of striving for excellence and do the right thing and thinking long term, we will build an enduring organization. And I think NACS today is the strongest it's ever been. I think it is positioned for the future better than it could possibly be positioned. Are there opportunities to improve? Absolutely. In a CEO transition, as I did my last round of quints, the number one concern was, hey, is your successor, going to change everything? Are they going to come in and make all these radical changes and so forth? And I've said, hey, I know the person. They're very considerate. They listen. They're very thoughtful. No, I don't think you're going to see that at all. However, a year from now, if there aren't changes made at NACS, I think NACS will have missed a huge opportunity.
Just going back quickly to Katrina, why'd we need to have the NACS show that year?
Because the industry needs the NACS show every year. Our industry is perhaps the most agile, dynamic industry that exists. It serves half of America. It introduces new products every year. There's new technologies. There's new business models. The industry relies on the NACS show. And that's why we put on the NACS show, is the manufacturers need the platform to introduce their new products. The retailers need it, not just for new products in the expo, but for the 50 educational sessions that we hold on regulatory compliance, best practices in food service, food safety, a myriad of important things that retailers need to know.
So let's jump to 2020. The pandemic hits. It was important for our industry to be deemed essential businesses. That may not feel like a big thing right now, But in the time when the default was shut down, we were one of the first industries or most active industries in saying, you really need to have convenience stores. Can you kind of introduce what was going through your mind in talking to our leaders about the pandemic?
So COVID hits, the pandemic hits. The government has basically taken a look at shutting down the country, right? And our industry, the retailers in the industry, basically looked up and said, we can't shut down. Our communities rely on us for food, for fuel, that we cannot shut down. We support our communities and so forth. And NACS, you need to do everything you can do legislatively to keep us open. And so we went to Congress. We were very, very aggressive in saying we're an essential service. We have to remain open. And they basically questioned that. We provided the data. At the same time, other retail associations were going to Congress saying, we'll close down, but we need financial relief from doing that. We went back to our members and said, how do you want to play this? And they said, we don't care about financial support from the government. We need to stay open for our communities. We went back to the legislature and said, keep your money, keep us open, because your constituents, our communities, need us to be open, and that's what took place. But we were virtually the only retail industry that didn't ask for money, and by not asking for money, we could remain open.
At the same time, you're leading an organization that everybody has questions. Will I have a job? Will I get laid off? Will I get paid? What's next? And you had to make a lot of decisions, short-term and long-term, for staff. Was there a thought process in how you looked at these decisions that in some cases you had at best partial information?
Well, yeah. So we were required to shut the offices for 90 days. We shut the offices for 90 days. We're dealing, as you'll recall, at a time where people were very concerned about not only just kind of their health, they were very concerned whether they're going to live or die if they got COVID, right? So, and yet, that's at NACS. Our members are open every day. Most of them 24 hours a day, with sales associates that are serving people every single day, right? And their corporate people were also working, right? And their division managers were still touring stores, right? So it was, in my mind, how could we not, remain in operations, and how could we not come back together? So the moment the CDC allowed us to reopen after 90 days, we reopened the office with all their guidelines, right? This elevator goes up, this one goes down. You may recall arrows on the floor. You can only walk counterclockwise. All of these rules, right? But being really sensitive to our people, right? And there were people that were afraid of COVID. I mean, they were afraid that if they got COVID, they could die, right? And so we made it voluntary to come back. We had a cap, no more than a third of the staff could come back for office density and all of that. And then we got through that, right? The vaccine came. That was another challenge, right? Of vaccine mandates, whether you require vaccines or not. Difficult decision to make. I made the decision that, to protect the people in the office, we're going to have to require vaccines. That didn't make everybody happy. I think we lost a few people because of that. I think it was the right decision to make, but it was, I use a term that probably isn't the right term, but it was kind of the fog of war, right? You have to make decisions without a complete data set, without complete certainty, right? And then we get through all of that. And there's this whole societal thing, and I'm reading every day, right? I'm talking to the global consultancies that we have close relationships with. How are other organizations handling these things? I don't really look at other associations. I tend to look at the corporate world as who I benchmark against. And then we enter this whole area of return to work, and people had, gotten happy with working at home and more flexible work environment and kind of dealing with that. And I'm reading research reports. I'm reaching out to companies. What are you doing? How are you doing this? And there are things that you can control within an organization, and then there are external factors that impact people that then change the expectations of how things should be internal. So the social disruption that followed George Floyd was an example of that. This whole COVID situation and return to work, remote work was a situation like that. So people, and the drumbeat was getting louder and louder on a more flexible work environment. And, I was bringing people back to the office because I strongly believe that at NACS, there is rarely an issue we touch that requires cross-functional collaboration. And that's more effectively done face-to-face than screen to screen, right? So bringing people back, and there was this loud drumbeat in the world about more flexible work environment. We need to have that at NACS. And you'll recall most of the response in the world was, well, work from home on Fridays, right? Or be remote totally. Well, we weren't going to be remote totally. And this whole idea of, and everybody here basically that wanted remote work and more flexible work environment basically was saying we should be working from home on Fridays. And I'm looking at Pat and I'm just going, what's flexible about that? That's just a new work week, right? I mean, maybe I have kids that get out of school early on Wednesday, and I'd rather be able to work from home on Wednesdays, right? I mean, why is Friday such a magical day, right? But I was resisting this demand for immediate policy changes. And I told the staff, as you'll recall, hey, guys, I don't want to make any changes in the short term that I'm going to have to undo 2 years from now, because you're not going to be very happy when I undo things. So I hear you, but I got to keep investigating what the right path forward is. So came up with, I give a lot of thought. I was on an airplane. I'm having a report from McKinsey I'm reading. I'm having a report from Accenture I'm reading about the future of work and all of this. And then it just occurs to me, well, now wait a minute. Everybody's thinking 1 day a week at NACS. They want a remote work. And I go, how many weeks do people actually work? It's like, oh, once you back out vacations, holidays, personal days off, they only work like 52, 50, or 42, 41 weeks a year. So now we're talking about like 40 days. Oh, well, that's like a day a week. That's like Friday, right? But I really couldn't care if they're at home or anywhere else, if they're not in the office. And so why don't we just let them take the day that they want off? And hence, what came out of that was our work from anywhere policy, where they get 10 days a quarter to work from anywhere. When I announced that, I think the staff was shocked. They went, whoa, this is a much better solution than every Friday. If I want every Friday, I could have it, but this is a much better solution. And so a lot of that is, if I didn't, I think, have the trust of the staff, that I was really trying to thoughtfully solve this issue, and it was a societal issue, right? I mean, it was an issue that I didn't think was going to go away, right? But how do you solve it in the long term?
A lot of companies made a critical mistake, and they said, well, forever we are going to work from home. And they had to walk all those back, and it really played out in culture and in how those organizations are still struggling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think generally organizations need to decide what's their base philosophy in interpersonal collaboration and in their businesses, right? And then that's the base policy. But I think the second wave that's going to come is there are tasks, there are jobs that can be done completely remotely. I had a couple employees here at NACS who, when I announced we were going to return to the office, said, I can do my job completely remotely and never have to come in the office. I go, really? Is that true? Yes. I said, well, you do realize then when I'm looking for somebody in your job, I no longer have to look in Southern Maryland, Northern Virginia, or DC. I can look in the rest of the world for the skill sets I need at the best possible price. Those people, blood drained out of their faces, and they came back to work. But I think that will be, particularly in larger organizations, if there are tasks that can be, if you're processing loan documents, maybe you can do that less expensively, just if not more efficiently in the Philippines or Argentina or India, right? So I think there will be a generation 2.0 as the future of work evolves.
That concludes the second segment of my two-part interview with Henry Armour. It's been great to see firsthand what we have accomplished as an industry over the last 20 years with Henry leading NACS, and I look forward to sharing more stories with incoming NACS President and CEO Frank Gleason in 2026. Until then, thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.